Today we've got a 2015 model Toyota RAV4. It's got the 2.2 diesel engine and roughly 83,000 miles on the clock. So this vehicle's come in today for rear brake pads. So we're going to get the wheel off and make a start. So before you start, it's a good idea to locate this, the locking wheel nut key, which yeah, people keep them in all different places. So if you've got the customer there, make sure you ask them where they keep that. Before we jack the car up or lift it up on the ramp, we're going to need to crack these loose. If I can get this to fit. Ah, that's it. Locking one shouldn't be that tight. So before I start working on the brakes, I'm going to take this reservoir cap off, which is just a push fit rubber cap. Mainly because I'll be doing brake pads, I'll be pushing the piston back into the calipers, and the fluid from the calipers will be forced back up the system into here. So we might get a bit of spillage, but it's not a great deal you can do about that, unfortunately. But you have to remember that if you do spill brake fluid anywhere, it makes a brilliant paint stripper. So make sure you've got some water to hand, and maybe a soft cloth or some blue roll. Right, these are already loose. Just make sure you're ready to catch the wheel. Sometimes, well, most of the time they get stuck on the hub, but other times they literally fall off. Yeah, that was a little bit seized on. Right, so we're going to do rear brake pads. The discs still look good, no lip on there, look pretty good condition. So to get this caliper off, we've got two 14mm bolts, and the slider has got 14mm nuts on them, so you can hold them still with a spanner if you need to. Yeah, you can see the whole thing's turning there, so. Just crack that loose, and the same with the bottom one. Right, hopefully I can just undo these with my fingers now. Wriggled off. Now with this caliper, you can see there, it's got a rubber boot around the piston, which you have to be mindful not to damage this, and it's worth just checking to make sure it hasn't got any splits or holes in the rubber, just because that's when the water gets in, and that's when problems start. So I'm going to carefully lift this up, and it should be all clean and shiny in there, which it is. So that means that that will slide in and out of the caliper nicely and not seize. A lot of these calipers, you need a special tool to turn the piston as it's being pushed back in, but this looks like a standard piston on here, a bit like the front calipers. Yeah, it is. So you can just squeeze that back in with a pair of grips or a G-clamp. Lovely. I'll tuck that out of the way. You don't want to leave it hanging on the brake pipe. And get those pads out. So these pads, they should slide freely in those shims, which, yeah, they're not too bad actually. Sometimes they can stick in there and that will give the same symptoms as a seized caliper, because the caliper will squeeze them on the disc to put the brake on. The caliper will release, but the pads end up stuck there. So it's important to make sure all of this is clean before we put it back together. So they just slide out. You can see one's worn slightly more than the other. But compared with a new pad, you can see quite clearly how low that old one is. Right, we'll give that carrier a clean up next. Right, so I want to take these shims out. They should just flip out, yeah, there we go. Now, before I clean those, I'm going to have a little scrape around on there, just to remove any debris that might be there, any corrosion. Same top and bottom. Top's not normally as bad as the bottom because the water sits down here underneath the shims. A little bit awkward to clean, but it's worth doing. Right, now these shims, I'll clean both sides of them, just give them a dust off. A bit of rust in there. You just want to make sure there's nothing in there that's going to get trapped and reduce the gap that the pad's got to sit in there, which could cause it to stick. Sometimes your new pads come with new shims as well. Unfortunately not on these ones. Yeah, they don't look too bad. Right, let's get these back in. So you've got that little tab there with these ears that slides up. I've got to make sure that that's not touching the disc, because that will make a racket. Oh yeah, I can see down here that's all clear. Same at the bottom. Great. They're back in place. Next we'll prepare the brake pads. Right, so you can see on these pads, I'll grab the wire brush actually, quite a bit of dirt there. They've actually got anti-rattle shims, which should just unclip. And then we can put them onto the new pad. That's it. And also at the end, you've got these little clips which help hold it in the carrier, but they're also kind of designed so that when the brake pad gets really low, a bit lower than that, this will start touching the disc and make quite a screeching noise, and just bring to your attention that the pads need looking at before it damages the brake disc. That's it. That's it. And before they go in, I'm just going to put some copper grease around the edge, around the ears. Just where they sit in the slider. Supposedly helps to stop squeal and keeps the pad from sticking as well. Lovely. We get those back in the carrier. Yeah, they move. You know, they're a snug fit, but they still move freely. Okay, they're back in. We'll get this caliper back on. Another thing, I don't know if I said, make sure these sliders are free. You know, sometimes these rubber boots, they get a hole in them or a split. The water will get in and they seize up, again, holding the brake on. Same symptoms as a seized caliper. So, as with most things, depending on what brand of parts you buy, prices do vary. They can be as little as sort of £20 for a set, up to just under £100 if you go for main dealer brake pads, genuine ones. Or you can get mid-range ones, obviously somewhere in between those two prices. I mean, on average, you probably spend around £40 for a set of brake pads. All you need to do is make sure you've got your registration number with you when you go to your motor factors or dealers, wherever you get your parts from, and they'll be able to recommend the right parts for your vehicle, hopefully. That's it. I'm happy with that. Right, I'm happy everything's tight on here. 2 bolts we took out. It's all pieced together quite nicely. I'm going to go ahead and get the wheel back on now. Oh, they are quite heavy, these ones. Okay, drop it down on the floor and check the tightness with a bar. That's it, I'm happy with that. As with all nut and bolt fixings on cars, you will find a tightening torque somewhere. But yeah, you just got to be sensible. I always like to double check work that I've done with an air tool. But yeah, I'm happy that they're tight enough. Right, now the work's finished on the brakes. I took the cap off earlier, and fortunately the fluid hasn't risen so much as to overflow out of there. It is just above the maximum, which is fine. One of the most important parts of the job when you finish is to make sure you pump the brake pedal, because you'll find the first application of the brakes will do next to nothing. The pedal will just go to the floor probably twice. So you need to pump the pedal to get the pistons back out of the calipers. Didn't take much doing. The level is fractionally over the maximum, but that's fine. There's still a big air gap at the top there. So we'll just get the cap back on. Make sure that's on properly, because you don't want any moisture getting in there. Brake fluid absorbs moisture, which is what's a good idea to get it changed regularly. Sort of every 2 to 3 years is a good idea. Now that all the brake work is complete on the car, I'm happy I've done everything up tight. I've pumped the brake pedal, put the reservoir cap back on. It's all good to go. So, like all of my jobs, I'll take this out for a bit of a road test. Make sure the brakes are all working correctly and not making any funny noises. I'll probably run it back in here afterwards and just give it a quick once over. Well, thanks for watching. Hopefully the video's been of some help for you. And if it has, please consider hitting like and subscribe. It will help our channel out no end. Cheers.